What's up everybody, my name's Dan. Welcome to Ahnestly. This is the Hbada E3 Pro, and it is probably the most adjustable chair I have ever reviewed, but it comes at a cost. Let's get honest. As always, links to everything will be in the description below. Please use them, it really helps this channel a lot. And we're gonna start off with the assembly process. I never talk about this, but I feel like I have to for the E3 Pro. The assembly of this chair was a huge pain in the ass. Literally every single thing you have to install, and it was just not a very fun process. So I would give it literally a 1 out of 10 in terms of assembly process. If you decide to pick this up, please prepare for that. It is very meticulous, very annoying. So we'll start from the bottom, the casters and the legs. This is one of those things I talked about in the assembly. These legs, each spoke you have to install individually, which is just a huge pain in the ass. But overall, the legs are made out of metal. The casters roll okay. Nothing really to write home here. Looking at features under the chair, the most obvious one here is going to be this footrest here. This thing can slide underneath your chair, and you can go ahead and bring it out and swivel it up. Compared to other footrests I've tried on other chairs, this one is not bad. It doesn't make the whole chair flop and flip. It actually feels fairly sturdy. This padding on here is actually really nice and soft. It's not only soft to the touch, but it's also got a good amount of give, and actually reclining and putting your feet up on this chair is actually a really nice experience. There are some things that you have to be mindful of, but anyways, let's continue with features under the chair. Now, moving to the right side over here, you've got this one tab that's kind of more in the front. This is going to be your seat depth adjustment. If you go ahead and push your hips out, the seat depth will come out, and if you go ahead and pull that, it's going to automatically flop back in. I'll talk more about that seat depth later in the seat section, but let me know if you guys can already kind of anticipate, one of the weaknesses here. Lowering down here, you get this tab, and this tab serves two purposes. If you go ahead and pull it up, it's going to be your height adjustment on the chair, and there is barely any height adjustment for this chair. At the lowest setting, it actually goes pretty freaking low. Like, this thing is probably good for people even as short as like 5'2", 5'3". That's how low it goes. On the maximum height though, I'm 5'6", and I am just about at the max, so I would say probably the maximum height for this chair is going to be somewhere around like 5'9", 5'10", in terms of getting your feet flat. There's some other stuff when it comes to the backrest that might lend itself to taller folks. Again, we'll talk all about that later when we get to the seat and the backrest section. Then on that same tab, if you go ahead and push it in, it's going to go ahead and lock that backrest in place. But if you pull it out, that backrest will tilt like this, and you can push it in, and it'll lock that back tilt in any reclined position that you want. It's not an infinite, but it's near infinite, so you can there's a couple places where it'll kind of designate where you can set that recline, but it will lock in place. Moving to the seat, this mesh is actually pretty decent. It's actually pretty springy. It's got that same feel that a lot of the cheaper Asian Chinese chairs have, so it's pretty rough to the touch. But in terms of its implementation, in terms of how springy and comfortable it feels, it actually feels pretty darn good. I don't know what's different here. It just feels pretty supportive. The sides are still pretty rough, so if you're someone who's a single leg tucker or a double leg tucker, not going to be great for you. It's going to push up on that ankle, and it's not great. I mean, you might be able to do this for a few minutes, but then I can imagine that your ankle's going to start to hurt after a little bit. What's great about the mesh chairs is that, all the air passes through, keeps you nice and cool, and then if you push air through with your booty juices, then that won't really necessarily sting the chair, so always a good option. Now, there is no pad here in the front, which is something that's really impressive, because a lot of chairs are starting to add pad here as a way to kind of substitute for a subpar mesh experience. With this, there's no padding here, and yet it still feels pretty comfortable. I will say though that it doesn't really have like a waterfall edge, so it is kind of pushing into the bottom thighs here, and if you're somebody who's got shorter legs like me and you're not able to sit in an appropriate height position, you might find your circulation kind of being cut off, so something to keep in mind. Earlier, I talked about how we need to talk about the seat gap issue in this chair. So right now, the seat depth is fully in, right? It's totally tucked in, no seat gap whatsoever. As a matter of fact, when I go ahead and extend it all the way out and sit all the way back, I don't feel the plastic in the back. The problem though is that if you have it extended out and then you start to recline, holy crap, that hurts. There is plastic literally right on my tailbone in this position. Ow, that does not feel good whatsoever. If you are someone who's taller, someone who wants to extend that thing out, and then you recline in the chair, you may either have to scooch forward a little bit inside of the chair or use much more aggressive lumbar. While we're talking about the lumbar, let me cover that. We'll get to the arms in just a minute. But this lumbar support is also super adjustable. So this thing, you can actually extend out, and per click, it'll come out a little bit. And you can do it, I believe, 3 times. And then if you pull it all the way out, then it'll let you reset it all the way back in. And this is what I was kind of talking about earlier, that if you are somebody who's got your seat pan all the way out, you can go ahead and extend the lumbar support all the way out, and that'll give you better coverage. However, even then, if you go ahead and scooch back in the chair, like as far as it'll go, and you tilt back, that plastic will still be on your butt. It won't be as directly on your tailbone, but it's still gonna feel like it's still not very comfortable. So the extra lumbar support is a nice touch, and as a matter of fact, the lumbar experience in this chair is actually pretty phenomenal. I'm enjoying it a lot. It actually kind of hugs that lower back. It reminds me a little bit of the Ahnest chair, which is that little one over there. You see how it's got that kind of support that kind of hugs that area? It actually is reminiscent of that. It's not exactly the same though, because as you move, this lumbar thing will kind of move with you. And that actually is a really cool sensation. The problem is when you start to like really kind of push it to its edges, then these like pad things start to dig into your love handles. And I've got a lot to love here. And then what's also interesting is that with this stuff, you can actually, I don't know why, but you can go ahead and push this in to really hug those love handles a little bit more. I'm not exactly sure what the idea here was, but this feels like I'm getting a hug, like a little too much of a hug, and I just feel fat. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. I'm not really sure why anybody would want this. It almost feels like you're wearing a seatbelt, and I'm very confused by the design, but the very fact that it exists is, again, kind of a con for me, because if you're bigger, or if you start to move around quite a bit in your chair, or you extend heavily to one side, then this pad starts to kind of dig into those love handles. Not super duper comfortable, but yeah, if you want a hug, I guess it's for you. So let's talk about these arms. These arms are reminiscent of what we saw on the Ahnestly Kaiser 4 and a movement that a lot of Asian chairs are starting to move towards. I don't love them. I love one thing about them, but that's pretty much it. In terms of the padding itself, it's rock solid, right? It doesn't have a lot of give. It's very hard. I do like that it's nice and long, so it gives you like full arm support. The problem is this upper lip here, right? Some people are saying, hey, it's because you have short arms. That's the reason why you don't like it. When it comes to an ergonomic position, you're actually supposed to keep your arms closer to the body. So it doesn't matter how tall you are. If your arms are close to your body and you rest them down, then this edge is going to always be digging into your forearm, and it's not the most comfortable. It's not until your arms are up here that you start to not, you can avoid that gap. But then at that point, like this is how I'm sitting. This is an over-exaggeration, but it's like this, right? So instead of sitting like this, which is more ergonomically sound, quote unquote, your arms have to be like this. And so your shoulders are kind of like dragging forward, and it doesn't feel that comfortable. Regardless, I just don't like how this thing kind of raises up and kind of stabs into my forearm here. Now, in terms of the functionality and the features, this thing is what they call a 5D armrest, because it can go side to side, it can go up and down, it can go forward and back, it can swivel left, middle, out, and then it can even go out one more. But then on top of that, it can also do this, which is raise up one level and raise up 2 levels. And the reason why this is so good is because you can go ahead and put it like this, raise the arms up, swivel them in, and now all of a sudden you have something where you can play a mobile phone, you can read a book or something like that and have it at eye level so that you're not hunching over your neck like this, developing that tech neck. You're actually able to relax and even tilt back in the chair. And again, with the footrest out, this is actually a phenomenal experience. Like this feels really, really wonderful. It's a great like lounging experience inside of this chair. It's actually pretty good. When it comes to the backrest, it's pretty okay designed, right? Again, the mesh feels pretty supportive. The only thing is that it's kind of turned in a little bit, and so when you're sitting inside of the chair and you try to open those arms up, you do find that your triceps crash into the edges. Now, I am by no means turtled inside of the chair. I don't feel like I'm C-shaped inside of the chair at all, so I do feel like I'm getting plenty of space. Just something to be mindful that if you do have bigger arms, whether you're more muscular or you've got more to love, right? It's just, you just might find yourself kind of banging into this a little bit quicker. Now, if you're on the tall end or you're finding that, the backrest isn't quite giving you the support that you want, well, I've got some good news for you. The E3 Pro's got you covered because this thing can actually be adjusted upward. And so you can go ahead and raise this up. And then if you want to bring it back down, you have to go all the way up, and then you can go ahead and kind of push it. This is a little bit finicky, I found. Like, I do have to kind of put some serious force to get it down, but it does go pretty high. So that's the minimum level, and that's the maximum level. So it does get a good amount of height on this. Height and weight discussion in just a little bit, but first, let's talk about this headrest. This headrest, again, is good and bad. I think it's good because it's super duper wide, right? I've had no issues finding the support that I wanted out of this headrest. It can swivel and it's got a really good range of motion. It's one of the few headrests that actually have an individual X-axis control. So X-axis meaning in and out, then you can the Y-axis, the up and down, and then you can also swivel the whole thing, and then this head also swivels as well. The problem is that adjusting it can be a little bit of a pain in the ass. Like, so for example, just to kind of be able to bring it out on the X-axis, it's really hard to do because you have to push it all the way back in to reset it. And you can see that I'm constantly bringing it to the maximum extension by accident because it can be really finicky. Also, if you try to make any motion on it, every other motion just like moves. It's not the most finely tuned. The tolerances aren't great. But again, in terms, oh God, there's also that too. The edges here are totally plastic and exposed. So if you're finding yourself in it and you do turn it, it could slam into that spine, which it just did. That's not staged. That actually happened totally by accident. So yeah, I mean, there is that. Once you do get it set though, and you kind of have it in that position that you like, you're able to kind of hold it there. And then when you tilt back, you just kind of need to like turn it or lift it. And then you'll kind of get it in the position that you like. So yeah, love and hate this headrest. I do like that they have that X and Y axis control, just finicky. Height and weight recommendation. This chair says that it can support 300 pounds. I'm going to say I don't think so. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend maybe like 200, 220 max. And even then, I'm not super comfortable because, it feels like a budget mesh. And so if this thing starts to sag, I don't know what the recourse is, right? The whole chair is done. Maybe you could get like a foam thing and put it on top of it. But again, it's just the hard edges. I don't know what that experience is going to be like. And so anytime there's like a more budgety style mesh on a chair, I'm always like 150 or less, right? Also, as you get heavier, I do think that these side things start to become an issue. I'm about 165 pounds. And even for me, like, sometimes I don't love that it's touching like the side areas. It's not the most comfortable feel. I do like that the lumbar support does feel very supportive. It's just these side things. It's just digging into my love handles and I don't really love it. Now the backrest does go pretty high. So in terms of height recommendation, again, I'm gonna be very conservative here. I'm gonna say maybe like 6 foot, 6'1". You could probably be taller inside of this chair. It's just then you really, I think, need to start using the headrest. And I think at that point, if you become dependent on this, it's just too finicky and you might not have the greatest experience. So those are gonna be my very conservative recommendations when it comes to height and weight. Even though the Hbada E3 Pro has a ton of adjustments, I think the trade-off that they had to make at that $550 price point is build quality. Everything that's shiny on this chair is pretty much plastic. That's plastic, that's plastic, that's plastic. Pretty much everything is plastic. And with there being so many moving parts, I just don't know how well it's gonna hold up over time. If you do wanna know a chair under $500 that I recommend heartily, go ahead and check out this video. I forget which side, it's gonna be over here somewhere.